Today, we are going to introduce a very special LoRA. This LoRA can achieve absolutely mind-blowing transitions. It was originally designed to create high-quality transition effects between the first and last frames for LTX 2.3. Because of that, this model has exceptionally strong transition capabilities. Besides handling traditional scene transitions, it can also pull off high-quality style transformations. This entirely depends on the images you select for your first and last frames. If the first and last frames are of the same type, for instance, if both are photorealistic images, the generated result is usually a seamless transition. But if the first frame is photorealistic and the last frame is anime style, the result tends to be a style transformation. Normally, when making transitions, we require the first and last frames to be highly correlated to easily get a good effect. But with this model, you will find that the greater the difference between the first and last frames, the more stunning the result you might get. Of course, just having this model and our first and last frames isn't quite enough. For example, when I was testing this model, I used a specific scenario. The first frame was an image of a beautiful girl, and the last frame was an image of a bodhisattva art sculpture. We were hoping for a breathtaking transition between them. However, after testing it many times, the result always looked like this, a simple camera cut effect. Finally, I optimized the prompt, and only then did I get a truly satisfying result, exactly like what you are seeing right now. Therefore, when using this model, the prompt is a phenomenally important component. We will provide you with a prompt engineering template to help you easily write high-quality transition prompts. The name of this LoRA is LTX Transition. From its Hugging Face page, we can see that this LoRA works with a variety of workflows. For example, first to last frame generation, text to video generation, image to video generation, and creative transition design. Some people might ask, what is a creative transition design? It generally refers to those transformation sequences we often see, like movie montage cuts, identity morphing, object swapping, and other surreal scene transitions. We can find the corresponding LoRA and sample workflows under the Files and Versions section. You just need to download them and put them into your own ComfyUI. To make the demonstration easier, I have also built this workflow on Running Hub. In the ComfyUI space, Running Hub is a fantastic online cloud platform because whenever new extensions or models drop, they are always the first to support them. At the same time, Running Hub provides an online community platform for ComfyUI creators, where you can find tons of sample workflows and creative inspiration. Next, let's break down the core components of this workflow in detail. This workflow is essentially an LTX 2.3 first and last frame video generation workflow. We have already explained the details of this workflow in a previous video. So here, we will just quickly highlight the key points. The first part is loading the main model. The main model we are using is also provided by Kijai. I need to remind you that Kijai is continuously updating his models. For instance, the LTX 2.3 main model I am using here is version 3. There is nothing particularly special about how the model is loaded. The only thing to keep in mind is to remember to load this transition LoRA. Based on the official recommendations, we set its weight value to 1.0. We need to upload 2 images to serve as the first and last frames of the video. In the configuration section of the workflow, we set the resolution to 960 by 1280 with an aspect ratio of 3:4. This is a very common aspect ratio for portrait videos. Let me give you a quick tip if you use more common aspect ratios for your video resolution, like 9:16 or 3:4. The generated video results will usually be much better. Next, we scale the first and last frames respectively, so they align with our target resolution. Moving further down is the standard process for handling reference images. We first scale the longest edge down to 1536, and then apply a compression with a compression ratio of 18. After processing the first and last frames, we need to solve a common problem. How do these images influence the sampling? First, our base condition is using a text encoder to do a basic encoding of the prompt. We will give a more detailed explanation on how to write the prompt later. For now, let's just do the simplest version. You just need to write Zhuangchang, which is the Chinese pinyin for transition, in the input box. Then we use the LTXV conditioning node to convert the positive and negative conditions. Now here comes the crucial part. To make the first and last frames influence our sampling, we have two nodes to choose from. They can inject the reference images as sampling conditions into our latent space. One node is called AD Guide Multi, and the other is called Image to Video in Place. When we talked about LTX 2.3 first and last frames before, we actually explained the difference between these two nodes. Let me briefly explain it again. Image to Video in Places directly replaces certain frames within the latent space. On the other hand, Add Guide Multi actually falls under the category of reference-based generation. Therefore, you will notice that the Image to Video in Place node does not have positive and negative conditions in its inputs. But if we look at the inputs for Add Guide Multi, it has the typical characteristics of a reference generation node. It includes positive conditions, negative conditions, and the latent. Its output needs to generate new positive conditions, negative conditions, and a new latent. That is the theoretical difference between them. Next is the sampling process. This is largely the same as the official ComfyUI sampling process. Just note that we adopted a two-stage sampling strategy, a base video generation part and upscaling part. For the upscaling part, we actually used an image to video strategy. This means using the first frame as the reference image to upscale the video once. After that, you will get your final video. Now that we have a basic understanding of the workflow, we are going to show you just how stunning these transition effects can be through various examples. Let's start with the simplest one. In this workflow, we selected two reference images to act as the first and last frames. The difference between these two reference images is quite large. The first one is a fashionable beauty, and the second one is a female warrior, holding a weapon. However, the girls in both pictures are very youthful and beautiful. The resolution we are using is 960 by 1280, which is a 3:4 aspect ratio. The condition node I selected is Add Guide Multi. The only thing you need to pay attention to here is the weight setting for the first and last frames. I personally think anything between 0.75 and 1 is perfectly fine. Here, I use 0.75. This gives the model a bit more creative freedom because our ultimate goal is to get a silky smooth transition video, not to strictly ensure the first and last frames perfectly match the reference images. After the sampling is done, let's look at the final result. This transition is incredibly natural and smooth. The fact that it can achieve such a smooth transition between two vastly different images completely proves the power of this LoRA. And don't forget, this is still just the easiest scenario. Next, let's crank up the difficulty. This time, the difference between the two images isn't just in the subject matter, it is also in the style. The first one is a short-haired beauty standing under a cherry blossom tree, while the second one is a bodhisattva inside a temple, and it is specifically a wooden art carving. These two things shouldn't really have any connection whatsoever. But if we put them together as the first and last frames, can it generate a silky smooth transition? Let's check out the final result. As you can clearly see, what we got is not a smooth transition, but rather a simple camera cut effect. It looks a bit like the overlay or cross-dissolve transition you would find in video editing software, just flipping between the two images. This is definitely not the final effect we want. Does this mean the LoRA cannot handle transitions between two completely different types of images? The answer is absolutely no. So where did it go wrong? The problem lies in how the prompt was written. Let me teach you how to optimize this prompt. Right now, our prompt is extremely basic. We just typed the pinyin for transition in the input box. Actually, on the Hugging Face page for this LoRA, a huge chunk of content is dedicated to writing prompts, including what trigger words we should use, the logic for writing the prompt, and its basic structure. While this information is somewhat helpful if we write prompts by hand, it is still pretty difficult to write a truly high-quality prompt from scratch. So, per our usual routine, I have written a prompt engineering template for you guys. You can choose any large language model, use this template as the system prompt, and upload your first and last frame images. The LLM will then generate a highly detailed transition prompt for you. Let me demonstrate this using Google's AI Studio as an example. I will create a new chat and set the model on the right to the highly powerful Gemini 3.1 Pro. Then we drop the prompt engineering template into the system instructions. By doing this, we set the template as our system prompt. Next, we upload the first and last frame images. Very quickly, the large language model gives us a fantastic prompt. We can just paste this prompt right into our workflow. The rest of the workflow remains unchanged. Let's generate it one more time. You will see that this generated result is absolutely phenomenal. At first, the beauty is standing in the cherry blossom forest and turns slightly. Many cherry blossoms fall on her shoulders. Suddenly, a flash of golden light bursts. The cherry blossoms explode outward, and she undergoes a gorgeous transformation from a youthful, fashionable beauty into a bodhisattva statue in a temple. Honestly, when I saw this effect for the first time, I was genuinely blown away. I feel the transformation capabilities of this LoRA far exceed my expectations. As we mentioned earlier, to make the first and last frames take effect, we have two nodes to choose from, Add Guide Multi and Image to Video in place. I have been emphasizing that the final results produced by these two nodes are actually quite similar. Is that really the case? Let's run a test for you. In the following workflows we tested, the images we picked for the first and last frames are all pretty tricky. For example, in this workflow, our first frame is an Eastern beauty, while the second one looks much more like a 3D rendered image, with a very strong magical fantasy vibe. There is a dragon made of ice, water, and earth wrapping around a girl, and the girl looks like she is showing off Chinese kung fu. We can use the prompt generator we just talked about to create our prompt. If we use the Add Guide Multi node right now, the final result is spectacular. The transition between the first and last frames is incredibly smooth and natural. An Eastern girl organically transforms into a 3D style ancient beauty, and the way the dragon appears looks absolutely incredible too. Next, let's see what happens if we use the exact same workflow and the exact same prompt, but simply swap the condition node to image to video in place. What differences will the generated video have? By observing closely, we can see that these two videos are actually almost the same. In fact, if you don't look closely, you won't even be able to tell the difference between them. To verify this, I did a ton of testing. My conclusion is that you can use either of these two nodes, it really doesn't matter. But personally, I prefer using the Add Guide multi-node. After that, I ran two random tests without any specific goal in mind. I just picked a couple of images I thought looked nice and asked it to create a transition for me. Let's look at this example first. The first frame is a side profile of a beautiful woman. She is sitting on the ground, hugging her knees with both hands. It is a very photorealistic image. The second image is a wide shot, showing a beautiful woman flying in the sky wearing a white dress, which looks incredibly aesthetic. Let's check out the generated result. The woman naturally stands up. A door appears on the white wall behind her. She pushes the door open, revealing an endless sky behind it, and she immediately turns sideways and flies into the air. All the actions are super clean, crisp, and incredibly silky. I think this effect is genuinely stunning. For the final test, the first and last frames we picked are two girls holding umbrellas. Of course, the overall styles are vastly different, but that isn't the most important part. The main challenge is that the camera angles of the two images are completely different. The first image uses a standard normal angle, while the second image uses an extremely low angle shot pointing upwards. We use the prompt generator to create the prompt again. Let's look at the final generated result. If we analyze it strictly, there actually is a camera cut in the middle. However, it feels very natural. The camera slowly pans down. The first girl gets a fade out effect, and simultaneously, an umbrella appears and slowly pans up, ultimately freezing on the final frame of the girl holding the umbrella from that extreme low angle perspective. I still stand by the point we mentioned earlier. We shouldn't judge whether the effect is good or bad solely based on whether a camera cut occurred in the video. We still have to look at the overall feel and aesthetic presentation. After running all these tests, you will realize the capabilities of this LoRA are seriously impressive. As long as we write the prompt according to its requirements, no matter what kind of first and last frames we throw at it, or how tricky they are, it can always pull off incredibly smooth transitions. Of course, I need to remind you here that we have only tested the first and last frame workflow. According to their official documentation, this LoRA is also effective in text-to-video and image-to-video workflows. But personally, I feel playing around with those might not be as fun as the first and last frame approach. So if you are interested, you can definitely try it out yourself. Alright, that is all for today. Follow me to become someone who truly understands AI.